Hello, everyone, and welcome to Tech Down Over. I'm Harold Muliati.
And I'm Jeff Blanchard, and here's this week's episode.
Now, you might have noticed that we've got a certain member of our cast missing. Rick is not here. He had a little bit of an emergency, but rest assured, he's fine. We haven't done anything too terrible with him, have we?
No. I was just going to say when we came in, I said, the role of Rick Zanardi is being played by Harold Muliati this week. You know, like they used to do in Days of Our Lives.
Yeah. And you know, I almost forgot to change out my name card, so I almost did.
Oh, okay. So you nearly were. Because we did, I think 2 weeks ago, we did a show, and we finished the show, and we realized, we didn't mention the fact that Rick wasn't here. But we knew but he had him in the titles, but we never said, no, he's not here today. So we did the right thing today.
But as you saw him safe and sound last week, you know that we didn't do anything terrible to him.
No. So what I've been doing in the last week with the tech, though, so I do apologize if I think I'm looking a little bit dark, but I've pulled my little studio apart, took everything out of the office. So I think the only way to readjust your equipment is pull every cord, every cable, every bit of equipment, took it out of the room, and then started afresh. So I'm still messing around with lighting, and if anybody's done anything with lighting, you know, you just get you can put the things back in exactly the same place, but it still doesn't do the same thing until you start moving things around.
Are all your audio cables in such a place that you're not ending up with any audio issues from? Because that's another thing with studio redos is you have to think of everything with the cables, or else you start getting buzz and you get noise.
Well, that's the one thing I took this time to do, was made sure nothing's crossing over and everything's in its place. And I tell you what, the gaffer tape. It's wonderful. I've just got it so everything's lining, the cables are all neatly done, because you can get all these cable ties, but gaffer tape was just taped onto the desk, so that just right. Yes.
Yep.
It's like magic. And
video guys survive on gaffer tape.
And it's just made such a difference, because when you just get things so much neater, you can do so many things, and like I didn't realize all the things I've got here, I can have them all connected up at once, whereas I had cables pulled out from here, plugged into there, and then I really didn't know where it was going to, because you just plug another cable in and do that, which it makes a big deal difference. So now I've got my three processors where I'm going to have three different mics set up, where I've got two at the moment. But then rather than switching out one and messing up the settings on one for doing some voiceover work, I can just leave it all here. So I'm ever so pleased with my new setup at the moment. So I'm getting a new new lease of life on the studio. So I'm wanting to do more and more. So
a new Jeff, a more efficient Jeff.
That's right.
A deadlier Jeff, perhaps. Speaking of voiceover, you were talking about possibly you're thinking you might start doing some more of the LibriVox stuff.
Well, I'm thinking about it. I've already committed myself to. I've already signed myself up for another chapter. And LibriVox is a sort of voluntary organization which gets books and records them and puts them into audio books. Some of the older style books that are out of copyright, but it's a great format to practice your skills. So, like when I'm doing voiceovers for my e-learning projects, that's really easy, because I've wrote the scripts and you know what to say, so it's much easier. But what you're doing with the LibriVox ones, you've got the book and you've got to read it word for word, and you don't realize what your brain does when you read. Because when you read all these things, and that's fine, you can read it very quickly, but when you read it out loud, your brain seems to change words to different words. So you just got to get used to reading out loud. And so what I usually do is get the script I've got to read, and then the first thing I do, read through it, in my head first and then read it out aloud. And it's that age-old thing, when as soon as you hit that record button, then you start making all the mistakes. But doing a chapter with 3,000 or 4,000 words, or just even a small one, 3,000 or 4,000 words, and trying to do it in one sitting, people say, oh, that's not much. But you just really do appreciate what these actors go through when they can go through these scripts and do 5 minutes without getting it word perfect. And then they're memorizing it. But I've got to do that with just reading it and still can't do it sometimes. So, but it's a good format to get that practice in. So with that, with the new studio setup, I've had the Rode NT1A set up, doing some recording, testing it out, and then the Sound Projects microphone, which I've actually gone off the Rode NT1A and back to the Sound Projects, because I find that's probably the better one at the moment. But with that, then I've been looking at another mic that Rick's got. It's the Neumann TLM 103, and I've been seeing a few people around that's got that, and it seemed to have such a nice smooth sound in that. But I'm tempted to get one of them, but I'll see if I can do a bit more recording first. But because they're about $1,000, I think, in US dollars, which represents into it's about $1,344 here.
Yeah, that's
well, $1,344 here, and that's just the microphone. If you want the one with the shock mount, I think here it's about $1,544 if you want with the shock mount. So
yeah. So
if
it seems sometimes on this show that Geoff's talking about getting something for quite a while, but then he doesn't remember, he's in Australia, where it's different there. It's going to cost a lot more in Australian dollars to buy a lot of these things compared to US dollars.
Yes, and like when they even say there, whoa, it's very expensive, it's $1,000. I said, yeah, well, try that with me for being about $1,439. So
yeah,
it's not only about the 30% in the dollar changeover, but it's dearer, just dearer getting here or something, because they don't probably sell as many as they do over there in the States.
And speaking of prices of tech, I was just talking to Rick earlier today. We were looking at SSDs actually, and we were remarking that as prices of SSDs have, I mean, they're still expensive. They're still more than HDDs, but they are going down quite a bit. Like he was looking at 4 terabyte SSDs, and Samsung's Evo, which I think is sort of their mid-range line. It's not quite the Pro, but it's not quite the basic either. Just last year they were, I think, $800, and now they are, for the 4 terabytes, they're like $550 or something like that. So they're still expensive, but they're going down pretty fast. And I think he said a few years ago there were a few thousand for something like that, and before that just wasn't available.
Well, it's quite amazing how as you said, how much cheaper they've got. I've got a MacBook Pro, a 17-inch MacBook Pro, and I've had that since 2011. I think that was it was on the last run that they did on a 17-inch, and that had a one what's it? What's it? I think it's a 1 terabyte drive. Would it have been?
Probably, yeah.
Or yeah, probably a one terabyte drive in there, and it just wasn't enough for all the things, and it just was a normal spinning drive. So I wanted to replace that, so I got a 3 terabyte one, and I think it was for the small, really nice one to fit into the laptop, and that was about $450, whereas a couple of years before it would have been $2,500 and $3,000. So yeah. I got that, and then of course the MacBook Pro screen died, and it's gone all funny, and it doesn't work properly at all. But I was fortunate enough to come across a 15-inch MacBook Pro that had never been used from the same vintage as mine, from 2011, and got it for next to nothing, which was really good. So I've got like a brand new machine, but now it's only 15-inch, but I transferred that and my memory back into that, and it's a slightly slower machine, but only by a point, so not much difference. But
yeah,
the difference now, what you said with that SSD, even in the old 17-inch, if I was to, I never used to close my MacBook Pro 17-inch down properly because it used to take about 5 minutes before it would chug along and getting up there. But with the SSD, I used to switch it off. It would just take, about 20 seconds.
Yeah,
So
and I think that's the
such a
biggest difference that I've noticed between having your OS drive for, whether it's Mac or PC on an SSD as opposed to an HDD is the startup times are just so much faster. I used to wait, several minutes for sometimes for my computer to start up, and now that I have a computer with an SSD, it's
Now,
seconds.
what's your feeling on SSDs for storage, like for long term? Because there's always been that thing around that the old spinning drives, if you save something on them and then plug them in 2 years later, it would be fine. But some people were saying that the SSDs, if you don't, they sometimes can lose things if they're just stuck in a cupboard for years, whereas the other ones are a bit better. So,
it's kind of like theoretically, but I'm not going to have any solid conclusion on that until I actually see the long-term, people's actual long-term experiences on these things, because it often doesn't necessarily reflect what it seems like it's going to be initially. Because there is that, but with HDDs, then they're a little more, just because they have more parts and because they have the magnetic component, they're a little more vulnerable to shock and temperature changes and stuff like that. SSDs don't necessarily have that, and I think it also depends on how they were used, how much they were used. But I think ultimately, it depends on we'll see what the long-term experience people have with them is, just because they're new.
I don't know if it makes any difference, but what I always do with any of the drives that I've got backups on, every now and then I'll put them in one of the little toasters, that you can just boot them up on your computer and just get them going and just mount them on the computer, just power them up. And I just seem to think powering it up and spinning it every now and then, or with the old ones, or just connecting up, might make a difference. I'm one of the ones from the old video days when you had tape. People used to have tape, and then they'd go back 3 years later and there'd be nothing there. So, well, no, because of all the chemicals, and that would all meld together, and you just get rid of it. Whereas I always used to go once a year with all my videos, fast forward and rewind them, and that we used to keep them in that sort of way. But the thing is, when you're looking at storage, yes, you might have these SSDs will last forever. But then when you say, I want to restore that, then you get it out and find that the system of the day doesn't read it or won't work it.
Yeah, that's another, the standards.
So I was thinking, what do I do? Because I thought, now I'm starting to get quite a lot of video storage, but I thought I want a more efficient way to back it up. I've got my old drives that I've got all the old 3 terabyte drives that I've just kept that for backup. I've got all them in the cupboard. But I thought I wouldn't mind a tape drive, because I thought they're very expensive, but they're more efficient and you can back up quicker and that. But then I thought, but if I stick that in a cupboard, quite often when you bring it back, your machine might not read it anymore because it's obsolete, or if it doesn't work, you've got all this stuff but nothing to read it on, and they keep changing their standards quite a bit for the
tape drives. They do.
So I've just come to the conclusion, whatever I archive and whatever I back up, just assume I'm going to lose everything, and then you won't be disappointed. I thought, if it's there, that's fine, but just assume whatever you save. But so that's just my personal one. I just don't know how businesses cope with that when it's it's the money that's coming in that they've got to keep, like these TV stations. I don't know how they sort of keep all their archives and that.
I assume they just kind of try to keep the means of reading the old media. I don't.
But it's just I
think what you have to do is you have to determine, which one file is really, really important to you, and just have it etched onto a golden disc, like in the Voyager that they sent out.
But I don't know if if you're familiar with like the Doctor Who series, the English Doctor Who series. you familiar with that? Or-
I know of it, but I haven't actually watched it.
Well, it's a series that's still going these days, but back
Hmm.
in the early, I think it was early six or probably late 50s when it started, the early 50s. In the early ones, videotape and that was so expensive. There's no record of the earlier ones because
Right.
they thought it was rubbish. Nobody'd know what, so they recorded over, used the tape over again. So the first few ones with the there's just no record of it
Wow.
because they recorded over it. And I thought, yeah, how things have changed. But now these days you've got things like YouTube where it just does my mind thinking what the amount of storage I've got for my collection at home is quite big. And I thought, just times that by how many millions are on YouTube and how many trillions of probably files are on there. So
Yeah.
it's just incredible. I'd love to. I think they've got. I think they're plugged into the moon as a big data source. I think that's one big hard drive because I thought that's the sort of size of the hard drive they would need. I think.
I was joking with Rick a few months ago. I think they get all this power both for all this ridiculous amount of storage and for all the
Mhm.
processing they do for the transcoding and all that kind of stuff YouTube does. They run off of human souls.
Well, I think there was. I'm just trying to think. I just saw that the other week. There was I think an episode of Enterprise, one
Hmm.
of the latest ones where the ship was smashed to pieces, and they found this space station that was automated, and it said, "We'll fix your machine." The computer got it and fixed their machines, and that's what they were trading in. They took one of their people because they were hooking people up and using their brains as processors on that because it was far better than the machines. And I thought, so somebody has already thought about that. So,
Yeah. Oh, and something that is actually old news but kind of related to the
mm,
storage stuff we were talking about is I was just reading about which many of you may know about the SDUC standard, where, right now we have for SD cards, we have the SDXC, which are,
hmm
our current SDXC standard, it goes from, capacity goes from 32 gigs to up to within the standard 2 terabytes, but I think nowadays the biggest cards that are available are 1 terabyte. But anyways, the SDUC is sort of the future-proof standard. That's going to be the next one, and it goes from 2 terabytes to 128 terabytes on an SD card or a micro SD card. And I was just thinking,
oh.
I don't know how they fit all this. I don't know how it's possible to fit all that on in such a tiny space, but I guess they have a standard that describes it
Mm.
as possible.
Well, yeah, and then like I said, having the ways to read it, I fell into that myself with a micro SD, 128 way that they format it, and they had to format it some way different. But then if I did it, it wouldn't work on the other machine that I was
Right.
plugging it into. So what I have to do is I put my 128 gigabyte micro SD into my PC, my Windows machine, transfer it there to the hard drive there, have a 128 gigabyte stick, transfer it to that stick, and then stick it into the Mac. So,
Wow.
but because when you do the cross format, yes, you could format it in the Mac format; it'll read it, but then the device that it's coming from doesn't like that. So anyway, but they're the things that challenge us. But with the new format, are they reading quicker? What does it do for us?
So that one, aside from the bigger capacity, the for the SDUC standard,
Hmm
let me see. I think it was it write speed or read speed? One of them was. I have it pulled up right here because I remember it was a transfer speed of around 8 gigabits per second, which is like a gigabyte per second, which is
hmm
quite a bit faster than the SDXCs, which I think top out at something like 400, maybe 300, depending on the card for it, and maybe 400 at burst transfer or something for the really fast like SDXC2s and stuff like that. I think V90 standard is something like 300 megabytes per second. So it will be like up to 3 times as fast on the transfer, which, as far as recording video, maybe it's going to be useful for like 8K or something like that. Honestly, I'm not sure. I mean, I guess 8K will be useful for, you can always record too much and then edit down later kind of thing. So if people are going to crop down, I guess, to 4K or something like that.
Yeah, it's just where will it end? Because like they said, the 4K, that's one of the good things with 4K is and once you know it, but you said most people are not noticing it, but people like me who and Rick notice it all the time. You can quite often see when there's all these different camera shots, it's all just the one shot they keep. Then they'll crop into the face, pull out, wide shot, and not so wide, and pull out again, like it's all these different shots, and it's just the same one. They're just cropping in and out, and just because they can. But that's the thing is, really, when you do 4K, when you're looking at it on YouTube or on the internet, and that's pretty much what most people do, you don't notice the difference. So you can have the great quality, and then you can put it down to just standard 1080 when you're cropping in, but it's still lesser quality than that on YouTube when it gets there. And so it's still quite an excellent quality. I look back at my old videos and thinking, gee, the worst setting on the HD is still 100 times better than old video. But you just said you can see the difference when you get the really high quality, but some of the lesser quality, it's pretty hard to see, say, oh, that's terrible. It's still pretty good. Like even this camera I'm using here, it's a video camera. It's one of the first HDs and still does a good job.
And that kind of reminds me of I was watching this a recent video from Tony and Chelsea Northrup where they're talking about these different camera myths. And one of the things I'll link that down below because I thought it was pretty interesting. But one of the things they talk about is JPEG quality, and basically what they say is, even though people who want to be taken serious as photographers, they always say they're going to shoot RAW. Shooting JPEG, other than just the dynamic range issue, because cameras don't compress JPEGs nearly as much as they did before, you're actually coming out with a good image quality. It's not going to be making your image looking so much mushier that people can really notice it compared to a RAW. So I guess that comes with things like better transfer speeds and better storage capacities. Where even though JPEGs
are like you said, but with JPEGs, that's quite true, and they do quite a good job. And a lot of people say, shoot RAW, but if they do, people don't realize. Well, some of them, when they don't do it, they've shot their 1,000 shots. And they've got to process every single one of them if they want to see whether it's going to turn out any good. But I think the thing is with JPEGs, if you do go and shoot in JPEG, it makes you take a little bit more time and trouble learning your camera. Because it's more so get it right in the first place, the basics, then you don't have to do much. Whereas I think we all do get a bit lazy sometimes in RAW because I can always fix it up. And most of the cases, it's I'll get rid of the shadows there. But whereas that's where I think the art's been lost a little bit, because you can always adjust something, whereas the old film days you couldn't. That's it.
I mean, the other thing that Tony and Chelsea pointed out is that when the cameras make the JPEG image, it's actually doing its own color processing and stuff like that. That doesn't actually happen when you do the RAW. So, and you can't necessarily get that, outside of the camera. So if you really like that, you should find out if you really like your camera's JPEG look. That might actually be better than what you can get fiddling around with sliders yourself.
And the thing is, most cameras have the facility where it just has RAW and JPEG.
Oh yeah.
And with the way memory is these days, if you've ever had a 64 gigabyte card in there, it's nigh on impossible to fill that up with photos. If you do, you're just holding the thing down for 3 hours, because it's for photos. For 64 gig to fill that up with RAW and JPEGs, it's very hard to do that. And you
would really have to be what my photography professor called a crazy monkey. Just
That's right. And then if you're one of these ones who wants to keep all your images, even if you start running out of space, you can go back later and figure out, well, I'll get rid of all these old JPEG ones. I've still got the raw if I want to go back to it. But you can always get, out of your 1,000 shots, and you only want, and if you one of these ones who just can't bear to get rid of any of your 1,000 shots, well, you pick out your nice JPEGs if you don't want to do anything, and just delete all the rest. But it's just great that we've got that the facility these days that we can hedge our bets and do both of them, because it's the sort of thing, if you just shoot in JPEG, well, you can adjust it a bit, but then you'll lose a bit more quality. You're better off in RAW. But if you can do both of them, and it's half the battle. But people have just got to realize that they're doing that, and when they start running out of storage, they know they've got something to erase. And I know I mentioned that to Rick the other day. He's getting back into Final Cut Pro, and when I first started with Final Cut Pro, I thought, gee, I'm running out of disk space and I'm getting extra things on there. And what I didn't realize with Final Cut Pro, like, you can have your files in there, then you get your optimized media, which creates your 5 gigabyte file will be probably 10-15 gigabytes to have a top quality to edit on,
right.
And you can use your proxy files as well, and so it gives you the best image. But what you're supposed to do when you finish the project, go and delete your optimized media, because your storage will be 3 times of what it is. And so you have 20 projects, and it's taken up all your hard disk space, but you delete that.
DaVinci Resolve kind of does that too. It's not quite the optimized thing, but it kind of pre-renders your footage as you're editing, and that ends up eating a lot of space.
And what a lot of people are scared to, I can't delete that. So, well, all it takes is, if you open that project up again, just click on it and click Optimize Media. It'll take 5 or 10 minutes and create it again.
Yeah.
But as I said, it's not like you haven't got rid of your raw, your initial...
The original source files, I know.
Source, but sometimes people just can't let go from that. But that's why sometimes Final Cut does a better job, or is easier, because it does do that optimized media. And then using the proxy files, I've started using that in Final Cut for all the 4K stuff, because it gets a bit heavy on the system doing all 4K sometimes. Anyway, I think I got off the subject anyway.
Well, we were talking about 4K, and I was going to say, with 4K, I think the thing that people don't do enough is, without having to use a zoom lens or something, really fast crash zooms on people's faces, where you just zoom in on their face, and because I just find that one of the funniest things. So if you like to do 4K video and you're listening, please do some crash zooms. They're hilarious.
That's right. I was just thinking, it was just funny the other day, that was somebody was filming something and said, I need to zoom in. I said, how do I do it? I said, well, it was on a GH5. I said, well, you just have to turn the dial on the lens. I said, well, can't you do it? I said, no, it doesn't do that.
Right.
I said, that's what you've got a video camera, do it. That's got the zoom on it. But I said, but that's when I said, no, just do it electronic, do the 4K, and then you'll have to do it. If you do it electronically, that'll probably be better. Like the old Ken Burns zooming in, you can do it on that thing. So like that one you just said, a quick one, but you can just slowly come into that. So
if you do the zoom in post, you can tweak it as much as you like and make it as smooth as you want.
That's right. Whereas I know the
Make
old
up for your own shortcomings.
The old XA10 cameras they had on I've still got my Canon one, the video camera, but on the zoom level you could set that, you could hold it down, it would just go so slow, it seemed to take forever. But I mean, just so you could just do that little bit, because the main thing with the zoom, it's not the done thing these days to zoom in and out unless it's revealing something. So you've got a tight headshot, and when you zoom out, you're revealing all these people or the things that you want to. But I think Zoom's got a bad rap from the early days of video cameras, where everybody in, out, out, in, out, and you think, it become one of these things. Never use your zoom.
I think in kind of videography and filmmaking in general, sorry, our connection hiccuped, but I think in filmmaking and video in general, the zoom thing is kind of, yeah, it seems to have gone out of style a little bit, but I like it. I remember, you know,
Hey,
a lot of 70s movies would have the zoom shots.
but I think what drove people crazy is not so much people, people probably never liked it too much, but in the early days, you've got a video camera, you've got that, whatever you recorded got played back, didn't it? There was very few people could edit it. So like even back then when I did, you'd had to go into your video recorder, receive it in there, stop and start and do that, whereas most people couldn't be bothered. There was no way of getting it into a computer unless you got, $3,000 worth of equipment,
Oh yeah.
hooked it up. Then you'd have to, it would play the tape normally, and the computer would just mark a file and then says, okay, then you'd connect it into your video, and then it would fast forward your videotape, record that one, rewind it to that part. So a 5-minute video could take you 4 hours to fast forward. It said insert tape number 3 if you wanted to do that. So it never happened. Whereas now, everybody, like you've got, like say, DaVinci Resolve. That's free for
It's free
so
for
everybody's got that
a professional quality.
Yeah, and as I said, from what most, so everybody's got, and when you have on a Mac, you've all got the iMovie. So everybody's got something to edit a top quality video with, and it's very easy to do.
And, while not everyone has a high-end camera, everyone has a phone, and a lot of the modern phones take, decent video if you know what you're doing.
Yeah, and said, what do they always say? What's the best camera? It's the one you've got in your pocket. And like some people, they said you've got nothing else, but it's always great that you can. I've been doing that a lot, like the taking it out and using it. Whereas before, I wish. And you think I've got my phone here, but they do such a good job at filming. The only thing that I think they're still rubbish at is actually seeing what you're doing. So you're pointing it and hoping you're getting what you think you can, because it takes a good, but when the sun's out, you just cannot see anything.
Yeah. Do they let you do the manual exposure and stuff? Because I know my phone has like a manual exposure mode and stuff like that.
Yes, some of the phones do, but I think I haven't even investigated on just the iPhone, because I said I don't use it that much. I just take it, and it's usually something's happening, so you don't have time to readjust yourself or start looking. You just press it.
But that is something that I've observed, is that over time auto white balance has gotten really good in general, but auto exposure, I still feel like it's.
No, it's still. I always think it, and like you said, it's. When you get cloudy skies, and that's always throws it out a bit, the exposure, because everything goes dark because the sky is so sort of bright with the just the clouds and that. I always find that
well, yeah, but I mean, on the other hand, cloudy skies tend to make for nicer taking pictures of people, because you've got the softer wraparound shadows.
I do
like,
much
look at Geoff
prefer
here. He's out against a cloudy sky. He's really outside. He's in Melbourne.
Right. Yeah, that's right. I must admit, I do like taking pictures and video in the winter rather than summer.
Yeah.
Summer's much nicer, but I think it just looks. Once you've taken a few nice pictures in sunshine, it's okay. But there's more detail and more. Yeah, I don't know. In winter, just more shadows, different things in the winter.
I do agree with that, but another reason that I actually like taking pictures in winter is because the sun comes up later, and in the summer, like now, a lot of places you can't even, a lot of trails, a lot of buildings will just be closed when the sun's coming up and stuff like that. So, yeah.
It looks like we've gone overtime today. By the looks of it.
Well,
and we thought we didn't have much to talk about.
We always think that at the start, huh? It's one of these days we'll learn, but
yes, and there's so much technology out there. Like I wouldn't mind getting a new. I've been using one of my Tascam audio recorder, recording into that, and I'm looking at updating that. I wouldn't mind updating that.
How's that one? Which one do you have?
The Tascam TDR40, I think it was. I think Rick did get that one, but it was a bit hard. He didn't like the sort of the interface on that, but it's just a little handheld like the Zoom type one. But what I like with those sort of ones, when you're recording audio, you can do it on your computer, but I'm always a bit scared that the computer crashes or it's got too much in the memory before you hit save, whereas these things, that's all they do is record. You can record hours onto that and be safe for getting the audio. So I've been hooking that up through the Aphex, the mark through that, out of that, into that, and just recording straight into that. And it's much easier to record when then you're not worrying about Audition. Is it going to crash? Because I've had that before where you've recorded for an hour and then came out and it crashed after 5 minutes. You hadn't noticed, so then you had to do it again.
Since you've redone your studio, I don't think we mentioned, what mic are you using right now, Geoff?
I'm using the HS09.
Oh, yeah, there it is.
Yeah, the HS09, but it's the sort of thing that I like all the other bigger ones, but they're too awkward to go into the shot. And, it's like the headphones. It used to be doing all these shows, people had headphones and the big mics in front of them, but now it's the sort of thing you don't want big cans on your head. You just want the little earphones like I've got in there to hear you back through my ears and that.
I definitely like this because, I can move around wherever and it's not going to kill you guys with quiet or loud audio. I could even fall off this chair and I'd be fine. I don't think Geoff can because he's got his switch there. He's got to keep his foot on it. So if someone tackles him... Yeah.
But that's the thing is, and also when you're using green screen, if you've got a mic in, it destroys the illusion because where am I here? So the mic would come into the shot maybe about here.
Yeah.
Just hanging in the middle of the air that wouldn't be on the wall.
Like, so you think, let me go to the edge of my green screen here.
Yeah, that's where your arm disappears in that there. So yeah.
Now Geoff is half hand. Yeah.
That's right. That was like there was an old Mad magazine where it was taken about Star Trek using the transporter. And then they used a transporter, and Spock said, "Something doesn't feel right, Captain," and his hand sticking outside of his ear because it rearranged and put them back together, upside down and back to
There's
front.
That I forget which one of the Star Trek movies that was. It's one of the ones with William Shatner. So it was from the original series, but where there's a bit before they actually go. It's like near the beginning of the movie before they actually go onto the main events of the movie. Then there's like two of their crew members that are supposed to beam on board, but then something goes wrong, and you just see this little flash of them, like they're like these fleshy masses that are screaming, and they just disappear.
That's right. Yeah, I remember that one. So
and then
they always have to point that out every now and then.
They get this transmission from a Starfleet command. What we got back, fortunately, didn't live long.
That's right. Yes, we got it back. Anyway, with that, I think we'll...
Yeah, we are just about done. So we, and most likely Rick, will see you next time on Tech Down Over. And thanks again for joining in, everyone.
Okay, and bye for now.